When I think back to that moment, pistol pointed to the face of my new friend, his palms up in surrender, my eyes wide open, stuck on the urgent thought, am I about to watch him die? Am I next? Those fractions of seconds spanned frozen and slowed time. I have no idea if my heart was pounding or if it skipped several beats. I just know I felt a shift throughout my entire body. But my thoughts might not be what you expect. I'm lucky. Not because we both survived unharmed, though it's certainly a blessing to count, but because of how few times this kind of thing has happened to me. To some degree, I can owe this, partially, to following my gut and leaving situations where my intuition marks someone as a predator with me in their sights. However, our situation was different. But really, the universe doesn't owe me anything. I have no legitimate claim that I deserve an entire life without negative experiences. So many of the world's herbivores must keep their eyes and ears on the brush at every meal, because every single time they lower their head to graze, they may be risking their lives, vulnerable to nearby predators. So truly, as a human, my traumas have been few compared to my years. 30 overall good years, sprinkled with unwelcome, unfair, painful epiphanies that shook my worldview and sent me into depressions. This is nothing compared to some of the aberrant terrors that other creatures and fellow humans have been forced to endure. Another reason I was lucky is because I was 27 when this happened. I was old enough to have a greater feel for human behavior than many who have been mistreated. Furthermore, I already knew that officer doesn't necessarily mean protector. I was aware of privatized prisons, familiar with the moral illegitimacy of incarceration for profit, as well as how massive the industry is in the United States. I knew that in truth, the U.S. justice system condones this legal form of human trafficking. And unfortunately, our officers, both well-intended and otherwise, actively contribute to this modern form of slavery. So it was not a shock to me when the man who robbed me was a cop. I can't tell you how many times I had dreams of being wrongfully arrested for the following months. Their purpose was very clear. My subconscious mind was trying to answer a very difficult question. How far over the line of my supposed rights should I allow an officer to step before I firmly say no and push my life to the center of the table as if it were my last chips in a game of poker? Never in those dreams did an officer assault me, because there's no riddle in that. If any man forces me into a fight-or-flight situation that I cannot flee, naturally, one of us has to end up either incapacitated or dead, because unfortunately, in that kind of situation, I have no nonviolent option. Either I allow violence to triumph to my injury, or I adopt violent behavior to protect myself from such injury. This is why the numerous dreams of wrongful arrests were not overtly violent. The difficulty of navigating these situations is within the implied threat of force, being outnumbered and outgunned. If in any of these dreams an officer would have assaulted me, it would have been a relief, because at least then it would be clear to me what needs to be done, an allowance, by necessity, to self-defense. Though this all fits the psychological definition of trauma, I want to reserve the word for people who have been through much worse. Though these dreams were terrifying in the moment, I welcomed and embraced them. I knew that my mind was working overtime to develop a plan of action in order to keep me safe. They eventually ran their course in an unforeseen way. There came a point where my subconscious gave up on the idea of security and strapped itself to the vice with a grin. For example, in one of the last dreams I had, I was pulled over, and when the officer came to my window and asked for my license, I took a $20 bill out of my wallet, locked eye contact with him, and tore it apart repeatedly. In another of the final dreams, I was walking down the street I grew up on alone, and suddenly multiple cruisers sped onto the sidewalk, blocking the path on either side of me. I stepped into the street where more cruisers came to an abrupt stop. I was surrounded by 8 armed men. One demanded to see my ID, which I took from my wallet, rhetorically asked, "This one?" and threw it into the sewer before inviting him to go fetch. I believe my mind was testing a theory. The idea that safety is an impossible goal. So when predators catch you, show them how little they deserve to be taken seriously, mock their false righteousness, and accept your fate as a mortal being who cannot possibly survive forever. I finally had my answer to the nagging question, but it wasn't the one I wanted. I know this part doesn't sound very forgiving, but the dreams only lasted 4 months, maybe less, which means I was still 2 years off from starting to forgive this. For about a year after it happened, I felt a disgusted shame that I aimed at myself for being so compliant, for allowing a fear to so easily manipulate my integrity. There was a self-resentment that lingered with me for not standing up for myself, trusting that a predator would show me mercy. Part of me felt that it would have been better had I fought back and got shot in the face as a result. That feeling came to an end as well, in what I can only describe as reverse trauma. Had I died that day, I would never have seen the redwoods, never walked the reflected sky along a black sand beach, never slept beneath the vivid cosmos in the forests of Vermont. I'd have never seen the orange glow of lava in the distance from a rooftop bar with a group of new friends. And of course, most importantly, I would never have experienced the hundreds of laughs and embraces and conversations I've shared with the hundreds of people I've met since. The reason I forgive this is because the great moments I love most in life drive me to experience more. The remarkable graces of exploring gorgeous landscapes inspire a strong feeling of gratitude. In such moments, I am lost in appreciation and fortune. Life is too vivid with a wealth of experience in every moment. My subconscious mind has realized that it derives much more pleasure and health from thought patterns not focused on threats. To hold these fight-or-flight stresses for years on end in vigilant preparation for the next injustice is far more damaging to my life than the remote repetition of such wrongs. So I let go of the residual fearful adrenaline and saved the rush of adrenaline for the purpose of having fun. The truth is, my life is amazing and I'm lucky to have it. I don't want to sound like I'm peddling enlightenment here. This wasn't a conscious choice. And I'm sure I haven't fully forgiven you. When new tales of police abusing power surface, I'm sure that indignation will be rekindled and I'll relapse into certain thought patterns. But I understand this instinct and cannot hate it for the pain it lives in. To put it poetically, there's a reason a rose has thorns. For a long time, I've had an understanding that gentle people live a confession. Whenever a gentle person interacts with another living creature in a very tender way, they reveal proof of their awareness that beings are fragile. It shows a respect for the preciousness of life and an intent to avoid the creation of unnecessary suffering. Every gentle person is someone who feels at least partially in repair. They have an intimate relationship with feeling broken. However, cruelty is also often a confession of the same fragility. I don't think you are a worse person than I am. I think there's a very real possibility you lack the blessings I was given freely in life, and as a result, had to adapt differently than I did. Young children have an innate trust in every adult they see, because the distrust of adults would be a bad instinct to have. We are entirely dependent on adults in our early development. In our youngest years, we aren't physically tall enough to pluck fruit from a tree. We are too weak to properly work the land. We are incapable of hunting. We cannot overpower or outmaneuver our predators. And we need to be taught almost every talent required for survival. And so, every time a young child looks into you with bright and curious eyes, they are seeing a friend, mentor, and protector they haven't met yet. Those roles are the only ones children know exist. This is why our early disappointments in life are so emotionally devastating, because we eventually learn the hard way, the unwelcome knowledge, that our friends, mentors, and protectors can be our predators too. I think to some extent we are all children, trying to find the right answers with very limited knowledge. even if we had access to an endless library of wise words and life advice. We know that each sentence was written by another novice who also didn't have enough time to really figure this out. Though I don't know your life and can only speculate, I think we both have found ways to lash out. Mine, luckily, were often channeled through a creative and artistic process, where you may have chosen to lash out by placing yourself in a position of power. I was, at worst, holding a bruised-knuckled middle finger up to the sky, feeling hot tears run down my neck as I seethed disdain at the lie of a God on whom I wasted so much good intention. Neither of us are evil. We are both children who had a cherished worldview we wanted to keep that life beat out of us, and we had to find a way to reconcile. One of the reasons I am incredibly lucky is my earliest years were nurtured by two loving parents. My mother had her worldview shattered by cruelty early in life, and in a way, the loving environment I was raised in was paid for by her traumas, because my mother used every ounce of pain that was inflicted upon her to create a blueprint of how she'd treat others without causing the same hurt. I didn't choose who my mom was going to be when I was born. It was her choice to decide if her fragility would manifest as cruelty or gentleness. She chose gentleness. This choice may perhaps be the best thing I could have learned from her in later years. I've made a similar habit in my adaptation. My painful experiences push me into living a better life, more so appreciating the beautiful graces that surround me, and cultivating the best relationships I can with the time that I have. The nutrients that compose the soil are all remnants of vitality now dead, and still, new life sprouts from it. Nurture yourself. You are forgiven.